Valencia.
Valencia, or Valencia, is the capital of the autonomous community of Valencia and the third largest city in Spain after Madrid and Barcelona, with around 800,000 inhabitants in the administrative centre. Valencia is also Spain's third largest metropolitan area, with a population ranging from 1.7 to 2.5 million. The city has global city status. The Port of Valencia is the fifth busiest container port in Europe and the largest on the Mediterranean Sea, with a trade volume of 4.21 million TEUs. Valencia was founded as a Roman colony in 138 BC. The city is situated on the banks of the Turia, on the east coast of the Iberian Peninsula, fronting the Gulf of Valencia on the Mediterranean Sea. Its historic centre is one of the largest in Spain, with approximately 169 acres. This heritage of ancient monuments, views and cultural attractions makes Valencia one of the country's most popular tourist destinations. Major monuments include Valencia Cathedral, the Torres de Serranos, the Torres de Quart, the Lotja de la Cida, declared a World Heritage Site by UNESCO in 1996, and the Ciutat de les Arts y les Sciences, City of Arts and Sciences, an entertainment-based cultural and architectural complex designed by Santiago Calatrava and Felix Candela. The Museu de Belles Arts de Valencia houses a large collection of paintings from the 14th to the 18th centuries, including works by Velázquez, El Greco, and Goya, as well as an important series of engravings by Piranesi. The Institut Valencià d'Art Modern, Valencian Institute of Modern Art, houses both permanent collections and temporary exhibitions of contemporary art and photography. Valencia is integrated into an industrial area on the Costa del Azahar, or Ind Blossom Coast. Valencia's main festival is the Falls. The traditional Spanish dish, paella, originated in Valencia.
Name.
The original Latin name of the city was Valentia, Latin pronunciation, meaning strength, or valor, the city being named according to the Roman practice of recognizing the valor of former Roman soldiers after a war. The Roman historian Livy explains that the founding of Valentia in the 2nd century BC was due to the settling of the Roman soldiers who fought against an Iberian rebel, Viriato. During the rule of the Muslim kingdoms in Spain, it had the nickname Medina bu Turab, City of Joy according to a transliteration, or Medina at Turab, Mdyn at Ltrb, City of Sands according to another, since it was located on the banks of the river Turia. It is not clear if the term Valencia, BLNSY was reserved for the entire Taifa of Valencia or also designated the city. By gradual sound changes, Valencia has become Valencia in Castilian and Valencia in Valencian. In Valencian, the grave accent less than greater than /e/ contrasts with the acute accent less than greater than /e/, but the word Valencia is an exception to this rule. It is spelled according to Catalan etymology, though its pronunciation is closer to Vulgar Latin.
Geography. Location.
Valencia stands on the banks of the Turia River, located on the eastern coast of the Iberian Peninsula and the western part of the Mediterranean Sea, fronting the Gulf of Valencia. At its founding by the Romans, it stood on a river island in the Turia, 6.4 kilometers, 4 miles, from the sea. The Albufera, a freshwater lagoon and estuary about 11 kilometers, 7 miles, south of the city, is one of the largest lakes in Spain. The city council bought the lake from the Crown of Spain for 1,072,980 pesetas in 1911, and today it forms the main portion of the Parque Natural de l'Albufera, Albufera Nature Reserve, with a surface area of 21,120 hectares, 52,200 acres. In 1986, because of its cultural, historical, and ecological value, the Generalitat Valenciana declared it a natural park.
Climate.
Valencia has a subtropical Mediterranean climate, Köppen climate classification XAR, with very mild winters and long warm to hot summers. Its average annual temperature is 22.3 DEGC, 72.1 DEGF, during the day and 13.4 DEGC, 56.1 DEGF, at night. In the coldest month, January, the maximum temperature typically during the day ranges from 10 to 20 DEGC, 50 to 68 DEGF. The minimum temperature typically at night ranges from 2 to 12 DEGC, 36 to 54 DEGF, and the average sea temperature is 14 DEGC, 57 DEGF. In the warmest month, August, the maximum temperature during the day typically ranges from 28 to 34 DEGC, 82 to 93 DEGF, about 23 DEGC, 73 DEGF, at night, and the average sea temperature is 26 DEGC, 79 DEGF. Generally, temperatures similar to those experienced in the northern part of Europe in summer last about 8 months, from April to November. March is transitional, the temperature often exceeds 20 DEGC, 68 DEGF, with an average temperature of 19 DEGC, 66 DEGF, during the day and 9 DEGC, 48 DEGF, at night. December, January and February are the coldest months, with average temperatures around 17 DEGC, 63 DEGF, during the day and 8 DEGC, 46 DEGF, at night. Valencia has one of the mildest winters in Europe, owing to its southern location on the Mediterranean Sea and the Foehn phenomenon. The January average is comparable to temperatures expected for May and September in the major cities of northern Europe. Sunshine duration hours are 2,660 per year, from 150, average nearly 5 hours of sunshine duration at day, in December to 314, average above 10 hours of sunshine duration at day, in July. Average annual temperature of the sea is 18.5 DEGC. 65.3 DEGF. Average relative humidity is 60% in April to 68% in August.
Economy.
Valencia enjoyed strong economic growth over the last decade, much of it spurred by tourism and the construction industry, with concurrent development and expansion of telecommunications and transport. Air Nostrum, a regional airline, is headquartered in Valencia. The city's economy is service-oriented, as nearly 84% of the working population is employed in service sector occupations. However, the city still maintains an important industrial base, with 5.5% of the population employed in this sector. Agricultural activities are still carried on in the municipality, even though of relatively minor importance, with only 1.9% of the working population and 3973 hectares planted mostly in orchards and citrus groves. Since the break of the crisis, 2008, Valencia has been among the Spanish regions most affected by it and has not been able to slow down a growing unemployment rate, growing government debt, etc. Severe spending cuts have been introduced by the city authorities. In 2009, Valencia was the 29th fastest improving European city. Its influence in commerce, education, entertainment, media, fashion, science and the arts contributes to its status as one of the world's Gamma-ranked global cities. The large factory of Ford Motor Company lies in suburb of city, in Almussafes. The Valencia metropolitan area had a GDP amounting to $52.7 billion, and $28,141 per capita.
Port.
Valencia's port is the biggest on the Mediterranean western coast, the first of Spain in container traffic as of 2008 and the second of Spain in total traffic, handling 20% of Spain's exports. The main exports are foodstuffs and beverages. Other exports include oranges, furniture, ceramic tiles, fans, textiles and iron products. Valencia's manufacturing sector focuses on metallurgy, chemicals, textiles, shipbuilding and brewing. Small and medium-sized industries are an important part of the local economy, and unemployment is lower than the Spanish average. Valencia's port underwent radical changes to accommodate the 32nd America's Cup in 2007. It was divided into two parts, one was unchanged while the other section was modified for the America's Cup festivities. The two sections remain divided by a wall that projects far into the water to maintain clean water for the America's Cup side.
Transport.
Public transport is provided by the Ferrocarrils de la Generalitat Valenciana, FGV, which operates the Metro Valencia and other rail and bus services. The Estació del Nord, North Station, is the main railway terminus in Valencia. A new temporary station, Estación de Valencia Joaquín Sorolla, has been built on land adjacent to this terminus to accommodate high-speed AVE trains to and from Madrid, Barcelona, Seville and Alicante. Valencia Airport is situated 9 kilometers, 5.6 miles, west of Valencia city centre. Alicante Airport is situated about 170 kilometers, 110 miles, south of Valencia. The city of Valencia also makes available a bicycle sharing system named Valen BC to both visitors and residents. As of October 13, 2012, the system has 2750 bikes distributed over 250 stations all throughout the city.
Tourism.
Starting in the mid-1990s, Valencia, formerly an industrial center, saw rapid development that expanded its cultural and touristic possibilities, and transformed it into a newly vibrant city. Many local landmarks were restored, including the ancient towers of the medieval city, Serrano Towers and Court Towers, and the San Miguel de los Reyes Monastery, which now holds a conservation library. Whole sections of the old city, for example the Carmen Quarter, have been extensively renovated. The Paseo Marítimo, a 4 kilometers, 2 miles, long palm tree-lined promenade was constructed along the beaches of the north side of the port, Playa Las Arenas, Playa Cobernal and Playa de la Malvarosa. The city has numerous convention centers and venues for trade events, among them the Fria Valencia Convention and Exhibition Center, Institución Fria de Valencia, and the Palais de Congrès, Conference Palace, and several five-star hotels to accommodate business travelers. In its long history, Valencia has acquired many local traditions and festivals, among them the Falls, which were declared celebrations of international touristic interest, Fiestas de Interés Turístico Internacional, on January 25, 1965, and the Water Tribunal of Valencia, Tribunal de las Aguas de Valencia, which was declared an intangible cultural heritage of humanity, Patrimonio Cultural Inmaterial de la Humanidad, in 2009. In addition to these, Valencia has hosted world-class events that helped shape the city's reputation and put it in the international spotlight, for example, the Regional Exhibition of 1909, the 32nd and the 33rd America's Cup competitions, the European Grand Prix of Formula One auto racing, the Valencia Open 500 tennis tournament, and the Global Champions Tour of Equestrian Sports. The 2005 America's Cup yachting races were held at Valencia in June and July 2005 and attracted huge crowds. According to official data from the organizing committee, as many as 150,000 visitors flocked to Valencia's port each day during the 2 weeks of events.
Demographics.
The third largest city in Spain and the 15th most populous municipality in the European Union, Valencia has a population of 809,267 within its administrative limits on a land area of 134.6 kilometers to 52 square miles. It is the urban area of Valencia extending beyond the administrative city limits has a population of between 1,175,000 and 1,564,145. 1,705,742 or 2,300,000 or 2,516,818 people live in the Valencia metropolitan area. Between 2007 and 2008 there was a 14% increase in the foreign-born population, with the largest numeric increases by country being from Bolivia, Romania and Italy. One notable demographic change in Valencia in the last decade has been the growth in the foreign-born population, which rose from 1.5% in the year 2000 to 15.1% in 2009, a trend that has also occurred in the two larger cities of Madrid and Barcelona. The main countries of origin were Ecuador, Bolivia, Colombia, Morocco and Romania.
Culture.
Valencia is known internationally for the Falls, Las Fallas, a local festival held in March, and for Paella Valenciana, traditional Valencian ceramics, intricate traditional dress, and the architecture of the City of Arts and Sciences designed by Santiago Calatrava and Felix Candela. La Tomatina, an annual tomato fight, draws crowds to the nearby town of Buñol in August. There are also a number of well-preserved traditional Catholic festivities throughout the year. Holy Week celebrations in Valencia are considered some of the most colorful in Spain. Valencia has a metro system, the Metro Valencia, Valencia Metro. Valencia was once a venue for the Formula One European Grand Prix, first hosting the event on August 24, 2008. The city was axed at the beginning of the Grand Prix season 2013. The University of Valencia, officially Universitat de Valencia Estudi General, was founded in 1499, being one of the oldest surviving universities in Spain, and the oldest university in the Valencian community. It was listed as one of the 4 leading Spanish universities in the 2011 Shanghai Academic Ranking of World Universities. In 2012, Berkeley College of Music opened a new campus at the Palais de les Arts Reina Sofia, providing focus on the music of the region through its Mediterranean Music Institute. Since 2003, Valencia also hosts the music courses of Musicane, leading musical institution in the Spanish-speaking world.
Languages.
The 2 official languages spoken in the city are Valencian, a variety of Catalan, and Spanish. Due to political and demographic pressures in the past, the predominant language is Spanish, but Valencian, as Catalan language is referred to by local authorities, is taught and spoken in most of the surrounding metropolitan area and province of Valencia. The government emphasizes the usage of the local language by posting signs and announcements of the metro area in Valencian with Spanish translations. Valencian is also used when naming streets. Street signs generally give the Valencian name for the street. However, older streets and those that span longer distances are also labeled in Spanish.
Food.
Valencia is famous for its gastronomic culture. Typical dishes include paella, a simmered rice dish with seafood or meat, chicken or rabbit, fatans, buñuelos, the Spanish omelette, rosquilletas and squid, calamares.
History. Roman Valencia.
Valencia is one of the oldest cities in Spain, founded in the Roman period under the name Valentia Editanorum on the site of a former Iberian town, by the river Turia in the province of Editania. About 2,000 Roman colonists were settled there in 138 BC during the rule of Consul Decimus Junius Brutus Gallico. The Roman historian Florus says that Brutus transferred the soldiers who had fought under him to that province. This was a typical Roman city in its conception, as it was located in a strategic location near the sea on a river island crossed by the Via Augusta, the imperial road that connected the province to Rome, the capital of the empire. The center of the city was located in the present-day neighborhood of the Plaza de la Virgin. Here was the Forum and the crossing of the Cardo Maximus and the Decumanus Maximus, which remain the 2 main axes of the city. The Cardo corresponds to the existing Calle de Salvador, Anwana, and the Decumanus correspond to Calle de los Caballeros. Pompey razed Valencia to the ground in 75 BC to punish it for its loyalty to Sertorius. It was rebuilt around 50 years later with large infrastructure projects, and by the mid-1st century, experienced rapid urban growth. Pomponius Mela called it one of the principal cities of the Tarraconensis province. Valencia suffered a new period of decline in the 3rd century, but an early Christian community arose there during the latter years of the Roman Empire, in the 4th century.
Middle Ages.
A few centuries later, coinciding with the first waves of the invading Germanic peoples, Suevi, Vandals and Alans, and later the Visigoths, and the power vacuum left by the demise of the Roman imperial administration, the Church assumed the reins of power in the city and replaced the old Roman temples with religious buildings. with the Byzantine invasion of the southwestern Iberian Peninsula in 554 the city acquired strategic importance. After the expulsion of the Byzantines in 625, Visigothic military contingents were posted there and the ancient Roman amphitheatre was fortified. Little is known of its history for nearly 100 years. Although this period is only scarcely documented by archaeology, excavations suggest that there was little development of the city. During Visigothic times Valencia was an episcopal see of the Catholic Church, albeit a suffragan diocese subordinate to the Archdiocese of Toledo, comprising the ancient Roman province of Carthaginensis in Hispania. The city surrendered without a fight to the invading Moors, Berbers and Arabs, in 714 AD, and the Cathedral of St. Vincent was turned into a mosque. Abd al-Rahman I, the first emir of Córdoba, ordered the city destroyed, but several years later his son, Abdullah, had a form of autonomous rule over the province of Valencia. Among his administrative acts he ordered the building of a luxurious palace, the Rusafa, on the outskirts of the city in the neighborhood of the same name. So far no remains have been found. Also at this time Valencia received the name Medina al-Turab, City of Sand. When Islamic culture settled in, Valencia, then called València, prospered from the 10th century, due to a booming trade in paper, silk, leather, ceramics, glass and silverwork. The architectural legacy of this period is abundant in Valencia and can still be appreciated today in the remnants of the old walls, the Banos del Almirante Bath House, Portal de Valdina Street and even the cathedral and the tower, El Miguelet, which was the minaret of the old mosque. After the death of Almanza and the unrest that followed, Muslim Al-Andalus disintegrated into numerous small states known as taifas, one of which was the Taifa of Valencia, which existed for 4 distinct periods, 1010 to 1065, 1075 to 1099, 1145 to 1147, and 1229 to 1238. València had a rebirth of sorts with the beginning of the Taifa of Valencia kingdom in the 11th century. The town grew, and during the reign of Abd al-Aziz a new city wall was built, remains of which are preserved throughout the old city, Ciutat Vella, today. The Castilian nobleman Rodrigo Diaz de Vivor, known as El Cid, who was intent on possessing his own principality on the Mediterranean, entered the province in command of a combined Christian and Moorish army and besieged the city beginning in 1092. By the time the siege ended in May 1094, he had carved out his own fiefdom, which he ruled from June 15, 1094 to July 1099. This victory was immortalized in the Lay of the Cid. During his rule, he converted 9 mosques into churches and installed the French monk Jerome as Bishop of the See of Valencia. He was killed in July 1099 while defending the city from an Almoravid siege, whereupon his wife Ximena Diaz ruled in his place for 2 years. The city remained in the hands of Christian troops until 1102, when the Almoravids retook the city and restored the Muslim religion. Although the self-styled Emperor of all Spain, Alfonso VI of Leon and Castile, drove them from the city, he was not strong enough to hold it. The Christians set it afire before abandoning it, and the Almoravid Masdali took possession on May 5, 1109. The event was commemorated in a poem by Ibn Kafajar in which he thanked Yusuf ibn Tashfin for the city's liberation. The declining power of the Almoravids coincided with the rise of a new dynasty in North Africa, the Almohads, who seized control of the peninsula from the year 1145, although their entry into Valencia was deterred by Ibn Mardanes, king of Valencia and Murcia until 1171, at which time the city finally fell to the North Africans. The 2 Muslim dynasties would rule Valencia for more than a century. In 1238, King James I of Aragon, with an army composed of Aragonese, Catalans, Navarres and Crusaders from the Order of Calatrava, laid siege to Valencia and on September 28 obtained a surrender. 50,000 Moors were forced to leave. Poets such as Ibn al-Abar and Ibn Amira mourned this exile from their beloved Valencia. After the Christian victory and the expulsion of the Muslim population, the city was divided between those who had participated in the conquest, according to the testimony in the Libro del Repartiment, Book of Distribution. James I granted the city new charters of law, the Furs of Valencia, which later were extended to the whole Kingdom of Valencia. Thenceforth the city entered a new historical stage in which a new society and a new language developed, forming the basis of the character of the Valencian people as they are known today. On October 9, King James, followed by his retinue and army, took possession of the city. The principal mosque was purified and the Mass was celebrated. James incorporated city and territory into the newly formed Kingdom of Valencia, one of the kingdoms forming the Crown of Aragon, and permitted all people that lived in the city, Jews, Muslims and Christians, to stay there and live as citizens of the kingdom. According to historical data on the capitulation of the city, the Kingdom of Valencia had a population of 120,000 Muslims, 65,000 Christians and 2,000 Jews, who by the terms of the capitulation and its covenants were mostly allowed to remain on their land. According to the Arab historian Hussein Mons of the University of Cairo, these were the words King Zayed spoke to James I when he surrendered the keys to the city. The city went through serious troubles in the mid-14th century. On the one hand were the decimation of the population by the Black Death of 1348 and subsequent years of epidemics, and on the other, the series of wars and riots that followed. Among these were the War of the Union, a citizen revolt against the excesses of the monarchy, led by Valencia as the capital of the kingdom, and the war with Castile, which forced the hurried raising of a new wall to resist Castilian attacks in 1363 and 1364. In these years the coexistence of the three communities that occupied the city, Christian, Jewish and Muslim, was quite contentious. The Jews who occupied the area around the waterfront had progressed economically and socially, and their quarter gradually expanded its boundaries at the expense of neighboring parishes. Meanwhile, Muslims who remained in the city after the conquest were entrenched in a Moorish neighborhood next to the present-day market Mosin Sorrel. In 1391 an uncontrolled mob attacked the Jewish quarter, causing its virtual disappearance and leading to the forced conversion of its surviving members to Christianity. The Muslim quarter was attacked during a similar tumult among the populace in 1456, but the consequences were minor.
Golden Age of Valencia.
The 15th century was a time of economic expansion, known as the Valencian Golden Age, in which culture and the arts flourished. Concurrent population growth made Valencia the most populous city in the Crown of Aragon. Local industry, led by textile production, reached a great development, and a financial institution, the Convit de Taula, was created to support municipal banking operations. Valencian bankers lent funds to Queen Isabella I of Castile for Columbus' voyage in 1492. At the end of the century the Silk Exchange, Litja de la Seda, building was erected as the city became a commercial emporium that attracted merchants from all over Europe. This boom was reflected in the growth of artistic and cultural pursuits. Some of the most emblematic buildings of the city were built during this period, including the Serrano's Towers, 1392, the Lonjar, 1482, the Miguelet and the Chapel of the Kings of the Convent of Santo Domingo. In painting and sculpture, Flemish and Italian trends had an influence on artists such as Louis Dalmau, Pérez Gonçal and Formant Damien. Literature flourished with the patronage of the court of Alfonso the Magnanimous, supporting authors like Orsolas March, Roig de Corra, and Isabel de Villena. By 1460 Jonat Martorell wrote Tyrant Lo Blanche, an innovative novel of chivalry that influenced many later writers, from Cervantes to Shakespeare. Orsolas March was one of the first poets to use the everyday language Valencian, instead of the troubadour language, Occitan. Also around this time, between 1499 and 1502, the University of Valencia was founded under the parsimonious name of Estudio General, General Studies. Valencia was one of the most influential cities on the Mediterranean in the 15th and 16th centuries. The first printing press in the Iberian Peninsula was located in Valencia. The first printed Bible in a Romance language, the Valencian Bible attributed to Bonifaci Ferrer, was printed in Valencia circa 1478.
Early Modern.
Following the discovery of the Americas, The European economy was oriented towards the Atlantic to the detriment of the Mediterranean trade. Despite the dynastic union of Aragon with Castile, the conquest and exploitation of America was the exclusive domain of Castile. The Valencians, like the Catalans, Aragonese and Mallorcans, were prohibited participation in the cross-Atlantic commerce. Faced with this loss of business, Valencia suffered a severe economic crisis. This manifested early in 1519 to 1523 when the artisan guilds known as the Germanes revolted against the government of the Habsburg King Charles I in Valencia, now part of the Crown of Aragon, with most of the fighting done in 1521. The revolt was an anti-monarchist, anti-feudal autonomist movement inspired by the Italian republics, and a social revolt against the nobility who had fled the city before an epidemic of plague in 1519. It also bore a strong anti-Islamic aspect, as rebels rioted against Aragon's population of Mudéjars and imposed forced conversions to Christianity. The Vicereine Germain of Foix brutally repressed the uprising and its leaders, and this accelerated the authoritarian centralization of the government of Charles I. Queen Germaine favored harsh treatment of the inhabitants. She is thought to have signed the death warrants of 100 former rebels personally, and sources indicate that as many as 800 executions may have occurred. The inhabitants are comparable to the comuneros of neighboring Castile, who fought a similar revolt against Charles from 1520 to 1522. The crisis deepened during the 17th century with the expulsion in 1609 of the Jews and the Moriscos, descendants of the Muslim population that converted to Christianity under threat of exile from Ferdinand and Isabella in 1502. From 1609 through 1614, the Spanish government systematically forced Moriscos to leave the kingdom for Muslim North Africa. They were concentrated in the former Kingdom of Aragon, where they constituted a fifth of the population, and the Valencia area specifically, where they were roughly a third of the total population. The expulsion caused the financial ruin of some of the nobility and the bankruptcy of the Taula de Canvi in 1613. The Crown endeavored to compensate the nobles, who had lost much of their agricultural labor force. This harmed the economy of the city for generations to come. Later, during the so-called Catalan Revolt, 1640-1652, Valencia contributed to the cause of Philip IV with militias and money, resulting in a period of further economic hardship exacerbated by the arrival of troops from other parts of Spain. The decline of the city reached its nadir with the War of Spanish Succession, 1702–1709, that marked the end of the political and legal independence of the Kingdom of Valencia. During the War of the Spanish Succession, Valencia sided with Charles of Austria. On January 24, 1706, Charles Mordaunt, 3rd Earl of Peterborough, 1st Earl of the Monmouth, led a handful of English cavalrymen into the city after riding south from Barcelona, capturing the nearby fortress at Sagunt, and bluffing the Spanish Bourbon army into withdrawal. The English held the city for 16 months and defeated several attempts to expel them. English soldiers advanced as far as Requena on the road to Madrid. After the victory of the Bourbons at the Battle of Almansa on April 25, 1707, the English army evacuated Valencia and Philip V ordered the repeal of the privileges of Valencia as punishment for the kingdom's support of Charles of Austria. By the Nueva Planta decrees, Decretos de Nueva Planta, the ancient charters of Valencia were abolished and the city was governed by the Castilian Charter. The Bourbon forces burned important cities like Xotiva, where pictures of the Spanish Bourbons in public places are hung upside down as a protest to this day. The capital of the Kingdom of Valencia was moved to Orihuela, an outrage to the citizens of Valencia. Philip ordered the Cortes to meet with the Viceroy of Valencia, Cardinal Luis de Belaga, who opposed the change of capital because of the proximity of Orihuela, a religious, cultural and now political center, to Murcia, capital of another viceroyalty and his diocese. Because of his hatred of the city of Orihuela, which had bombarded and looted Valencia during the War of Succession, the cardinal resigned the viceroyalty in protest against the actions of Philip, who finally relented and returned the capital to Valencia. With the abolition of the charters of Valencia and most of its institutions, and the confirmation of the kingdom and its capital to the laws and customs of Castile, Top civil officials were no longer elected, but instead were appointed directly from Madrid, the king's court city, the offices often filled by foreign aristocrats. Valencia had to become accustomed to being an occupied city, living with the presence of troops quartered in the citadel near the convent of Santo Domingo and in other buildings such as the Lanjar, which served as a barracks until 1762. The Valencian economy recovered during the 18th century with the rising manufacture of woven silk and ceramic tiles. The Palais de Justícia is an example of the affluence manifested in the most prosperous times of Bourbon rule, 1758 to 1802, during the rule of Charles III. The 18th century was the age of the Enlightenment in Europe, and its humanistic ideals influenced such men as Gregory Mayans and Pérez Bayer in Valencia, who maintained correspondence with the leading French and German thinkers of the time. In this atmosphere of the exaltation of ideas, the Economic Society of Friends of the Country, Societat Econòmica d'Amics del País, was founded in 1776. It introduced numerous improvements in agriculture and industry and promoted various cultural, civic, and economic institutions in Valencia.
Late modern and contemporary.
The 19th century began with Spain embroiled in wars with France, Portugal, and England, but the War of Independence most affected the Valencian territories and the capital city. The repercussions of the French Revolution were still felt when Napoleon's armies invaded the Iberian Peninsula. The Valencian people rose in arms against them on May 23, 1808, aroused by such characters as Vicent Domènech el Pallator. The mutineers seized the citadel, a supreme junta government took over, and on 26 to 28 June, Napoleon's Marshal Moncey attacked the city with a column of 9,000 French imperial troops in the First Battle of Valencia. He failed to take the city in 2 assaults and retreated to Madrid. Marshal Suchet began a long siege of the city in October 1811, and after intense bombardment forced it to surrender on January 8, 1812. After the capitulation, the French instituted reforms in Valencia, which became the capital of Spain when the Bonapartist pretender to the throne, José I, Joseph Bonaparte, Napoleon's elder brother, moved the court there in the summer of 1812. The disaster of the Battle of Vitoria on June 21, 1813 obliged Suchet to quit Valencia, and the French troops withdrew in July. During the Napoleonic invasion, the Valencians had sent representatives to the Cortes of Cadiz, where a liberal, anti-seigneurial national constitution was drafted. Ferdinand VII became king after the victorious end of the Peninsular War, which freed Spain from Napoleonic domination. When he returned on March 24, 1814 from exile in France, the Cortes requested that he respect the liberal constitution of 1812, which seriously limited royal powers. Ferdinand refused and went to Valencia instead of Madrid. Here, on April 17, General Liao invited the king to reclaim his absolute rights and put his troops at the king's disposition. The king abolished the constitution of 1812. He followed this act by dissolving the 2 chambers of the Spanish Parliament on May 10. Thus began 6 years, 1814 to 1820, of absolutist rule, but the constitution was reinstated during the Trienio Liberal, a period of 3 years of liberal government in Spain from 1820 to 1823. A fervent follower of the absolutist cause, Liao had played an important role in the repression of the supporters of the Constitution of 1812. For this, he was arrested in 1820 and executed in 1822 by garroting. Conflict between absolutists and liberals continued, and in the period of conservative rule called the ominous decade, 1823-1833, which followed the Trienio Liberal, there was ruthless repression by government forces and the Catholic Inquisition. The last victim of the Inquisition was Gaetà Ripoli, a teacher accused of being a deist and a Mason who was hanged in Valencia in 1824. On the death of King Ferdinand VII in 1833, Baldomero y Espartero became one of the most ardent defenders of the hereditary rights of his daughter, Isabella II. On the outbreak of the First Carlist War, the government sent him to the front, where he severely defeated the Carlists in many encounters. He was associated with the radical, or progressive, wing of Spanish liberalism and became its symbol and champion after taking credit for the victory over the Carlists in 1839. During the regency of Maria Cristina, Espartero ruled Spain for 2 years as its 18th prime minister from September 16, 1840 to May 21, 1841. Under his progressive government the old regime was tenuously reconciled to his liberal policies. During this period of upheaval in the provinces he declared that all the estates of the church, its congregations, and its religious orders were national property, though in Valencia, most of this property was subsequently acquired by the local bourgeoisie. City life in Valencia carried on in a revolutionary climate, with frequent clashes between liberals and republicans, and the constant threat of reprisals by the Carlist troops of General Cabrera. The reign of Isabella II as an adult, 1843 to 1868, was a period of relative stability and growth for Valencia. Services and infrastructure, including municipal water supply, paved roads, and gas distribution, were substantially improved, and a large-scale construction project was initiated at the port. Gas lighting was introduced in 1840, and soon after a public works project began to pave the streets with cobblestones, a task that took several years because of the lack of council funds. The public water supply network was completed in 1850, and in 1858 the architects Sebastián Monlinas Dels, Antonino Sancho, and Timoteo Carvo drafted a general expansion project for the city that included demolishing its ancient walls. A second version was printed in 1868. Neither proposed project received final approval, but they did serve as a guide, though not closely followed, for future growth. By 1860 the municipality had 140,416 inhabitants, and beginning in 1866 the ancient city walls were almost entirely demolished to facilitate urban expansion. Electricity was introduced to Valencia in 1882. During the Cantonal Revolution of 1873, a Cantonalist uprising that took place during the First Spanish Republic, the city was consolidated with most of the nearby cities in the federal canton of Valencia, proclaimed on July 19 and dissolved on August 7. It did not have the revolutionary fervor of the movement in cities like Alcoy, as it was initiated by the bourgeoisie, but the Madrid government sent General Martínez Campos to stifle the rebellion by force of arms and subjected Valencia to an intense bombardment. The city surrendered on August 7. Alfonso XII was proclaimed king on December 29, 1874, and arrived in Valencia on January 11, 1875 on his way to Madrid, marking the end of the First Republic. Despite the Bourbon Restoration, the roughly even balance between conservatives and liberals in the government was sustained in Valencia until the granting of universal male suffrage in 1890, after which the Republicans, led by Vicente Blasco Ibáñez, gained considerably more of the popular vote. During the second half of the 19th century the bourgeoisie encouraged the development of the city and its environs. Landowners were enriched by the introduction of the orange crop and the expansion of vineyards and other crops. This economic boom corresponded with a revival of local traditions and of the Valencian language, which had been ruthlessly suppressed from the time of Philip V around 1870. The Valencian Renaissance, a movement committed to the revival of the Valencian language and traditions, began to gain ascendancy. In its early stages the movement inclined to the romanticism of the poet Theodore Laurent, and resisted the more assertive remonstrances of Constantine Lombard, founder of the still extant Cultural Society, Rat Penat Lo, which is dedicated to the promotion and dissemination of the Valencian language and culture. In 1894 the Círculo de Bellas Artes de Valencia, Circle of Fine Arts in Valencia, was founded. During the 20th century Valencia remained the third most populous city of Spain as its population tripled, rising from 213,550 inhabitants in 1900 to 739,014 in 2000. Valencia was also third in industrial and economic development. Notable milestones include urban expansion of the city in the latter 1800s, the creation of the Banco de Valencia in 1900, construction of the Central and Columbus markets, and the construction of the Gare du Nord railway station, completed in 1921. The new century was marked in Valencia with a major event, The Valencian Regional Exhibition of 1909, La Exposición Regional Valenciana de 1909, which emulated the national and universal expositions held in other cities. This production was promoted by the Ateneo Mercantil de Valencia, Mercantile Athenaeum of Valencia, especially by its chairman, Tomàs Trena y Palavicino, and had the support of the government and the crown. It was officially inaugurated by King Alfonso XIII himself. In the early 20th century, Valencia was an industrialized city. The silk industry had disappeared, but there was a large production of hides and skins, wood, metals and foodstuffs, this last with substantial exports, particularly of wine and citrus. Small businesses predominated, but with the rapid mechanization of industry larger companies were being formed. The best expression of this dynamic was in the regional exhibitions, including that of 1909 held next to the pedestrian avenue La Alborada, Paseo de la Alameda, which depicted the progress of agriculture and industry. Among the most architecturally successful buildings of the era were those designed in the Art Nouveau style, such as the North Station, Gare du Nord, and the Central and Columbus markets. Industrial workers began to organize in increasing numbers to demand better living conditions. The Republican Party of Blasco Ibáñez responded to these demands and gained enormous popular support, dominating the ruling council between 1901 and 1923. World War I, 1914 to 1918, greatly affected the Valencian economy, causing the collapse of his citrus exports. The establishment of the dictatorship of Primo de Rivera in 1923 tempered social unrest for some years, but not the growing political radicalization of the working classes. The labor movement gradually consolidated its union organization, while the conservative factions rallied around the Valencian regional right. The Republic, 1931 to 1939, opened the way for democratic participation and the increased politicization of citizens, especially in response to the rise of conservative front power in 1933. This climate marked the elections of 1936, won by the Popular Front political coalition, which promoted the fervor of the masses. The military uprising of July 18 failed to triumph in Valencia. For some months there was a revolutionary atmosphere, gradually neutralized by the government. The inevitable march to civil war and the combat in Madrid resulted in the removal of the capital of the Republic to Valencia. On November 6, 1936, the city became the capital of Republican Spain under the control of the Prime Minister Manuel Aznar. The government moved to the Palais de Benicarlo, its ministries occupying various other buildings. The city was heavily bombarded by air and sea, necessitating the construction of over 200 bomb shelters to protect the population. On January 13, 1937, the city was first shelled by a vessel of the fascist Italian Navy, which was blockading the port by the order of Benito Mussolini. The bombardment intensified and inflicted massive destruction on several occasions. By the end of the war, the city had survived 442 bombardments, leaving 2,831 dead and 847 wounded, although it is estimated that the death toll was higher, as the data given are those recognized by Francisco Franco's government. The Republican government passed to Juan Negrin on May 17, 1937, and on October 31 of that year moved to Barcelona. On March 30, 1939, Valencia surrendered and the nationalist troops entered the city. The post-war years were a time of hardship for Valencians. During Franco's regime, speaking or teaching Valencian was prohibited. In a significant reversal, it is now compulsory for every schoolchild in Valencia. The dictatorship of Franco forbade political parties and began a harsh ideological and cultural repression countenanced and sometimes even led by the church. The financial markets were destabilized, causing a severe economic crisis that led to rationing. Black markets in rationed goods existed for over a decade. The Francoist administrations of Valencia silenced publicity of the catastrophic consequences of the floods of 1949 with the attendant dozens of deaths, but could not do the same after the even more tragic flood of 1957 when the river Turia overflowed its banks again, killing many Valencians. Officially, 81 died. The actual figure is not known. To prevent further disasters, the river was eventually diverted to a new course. The old riverbed was abandoned for years, and successive Francoist mayors proposed making it a motorway, but that option was finally rejected with the advent of democracy and fervent neighborhood protests. The river was divided in two at the western city limits, Plan Sur de Valencia, and diverted southwards along a new course that skirts the city, before meeting the Mediterranean. The old course of the river continues, dry, through the city centre, almost to the sea. The old riverbed is now a verdant sunken park called the Garden of the Turia, Jardí del Turia or Jardín del Turia, that allows cyclists and pedestrians to traverse much of the city without the use of roads. Overhead bridges carry motor traffic across the park. The economy began to recover in the early 1960s, and the city experienced explosive population growth through immigration spurred by the jobs created with the implementation of major urban projects and infrastructure improvements. With the advent of democracy in Spain, the ancient Kingdom of Valencia was established as a new autonomous entity, the Valencian Community, the Statute of Autonomy of 1982 designating Valencia as its capital. On the night of February 23, 1981, shortly after Antonio Tejeiro had stormed Congress, the Captain General of the 3rd Military Region, Jaime Milans del Bosch, rose up in Valencia, put tanks on the streets, declared a state of emergency and tried to convince other senior military figures to support the coup. After the televised message of King Juan Carlos I, those in the military who had not yet aligned themselves decided to remain loyal to the government, and the coup failed. Despite this lack of support, Milans del Bosch only surrendered at 5 a.m. on the next day, February 24. Democracy has led to the recovery of the Valencian language and culture, but could not resolve the social tensions concerning these symbols. This identity conflict, known facetiously as the Battle of Valencia, has been characterized by considerable conflict and violence, dividing Valencia socially and politically. Valencia has experienced a surge in its cultural development during the last 30 years, exemplified by exhibitions and performances at such iconic institutions as the Palais de la Música, the Palacio de Congresos, the Metro, the City of Arts and Sciences, Ciutat de les Arts y les Sciences, the Valencian Museum of Enlightenment and Modernity, Museo Valenciano de la Ilustración y la Modernidad, and the Institute of Modern Art, Instituto Valenciano de Arte Moderno. The various productions of Santiago Calatrava, a renowned structural engineer, architect, and sculptor, and of the architect Felix Candela have contributed to Valencia's international reputation. These public works and the ongoing rehabilitation of the old city, Ciutat Vella, have helped improve the city's livability, and tourism is continually increasing. On July 9, 2006, during Mass at Valencia's Cathedral, Our Lady of the Forsaken Basilica, Pope Benedict XVI used, at the World Day of Families, the Santo Claus, a 1st-century Middle Eastern artifact that some Catholics believe is the Holy Grail. It was supposedly brought to the church by Emperor Valerian in the 3rd century, after having been brought by St. Peter to Rome from Jerusalem. The Santo Claus, Holy Chalice, is a simple, small stone cup. Its base was added in medieval times and consists of fine gold, alabaster and gemstones. Valencia was selected in 2003 to host the historic America's Cup yacht race, the first European city ever to do so. The America's Cup matches took place in summer 2007. On July 3, 2007, Alinghi defeated Team New Zealand and successfully defended the America's Cup. 22 days later, on July 25, 2007, the leaders of the Alinghi Syndicate, holder of the America's Cup, officially announced that Valencia would be the host city for the 33rd America's Cup, held in June 2009. Since 1991, the city council has been governed by the People's Party of Spain, Partido Popular, PP, and Marita Barberanola, who became mayor by a pact made with the Valencian Union. She is a member of the National Council of the People's Party and a representative in the Valencian Regional Parliament, Corts Valencianes. She turned down an offer to become a national deputy at the 2008 Spanish general election.
Main sites. Architecture.
The ancient winding streets of the Barrio del Carmen contain buildings dating to Roman and Arabic times. The cathedral, built between the 13th and 15th centuries, is primarily of Gothic style but contains elements of Baroque and Romanesque architecture. Beside the cathedral is the Gothic Basilica of the Virgin, Basilica de la Virgen de los Desamparados. The 15th-century Serrano and Court Towers are part of what was once the wall surrounding the city. UNESCO has recognized the Silk Exchange Market, La Litja de la Seda, erected in early Valencian Gothic style, as a World Heritage Site. The modernist Central Market, Mercado Central, is one of the largest in Europe. The main railway station Estación del Norte is built in Modernism, the Spanish version of Art Nouveau, style. World-renowned, and city-born, architect Santiago Calatrava produced the futuristic City of Arts and Sciences, Ciutat de les Arts y les Sciences, which contains an opera house, performing arts center, a science museum, an IMAX cinema planetarium, an oceanographic park and other structures such as a long covered walkway and restaurants. Calatrava is also responsible for the bridge named after him in the center of the city. The Music Palace, Palais de la Música, is another noteworthy example of modern architecture in Valencia.
The cathedral.
The Valencia Cathedral was called Iglesia Mayor in the early days of the Reconquista, then Iglesia de la Cio. Cio is from the Latin sedes, that is, archiepiscopal, see, and by virtue of the papal concession of October 16, 1866, it was called the Basilica Metropolitana. It is situated in the center of the ancient Roman city where some believe the Temple of Diana stood. In Gothic times, it seems to have been dedicated to the Holy Saviour. The Cid dedicated it to the Blessed Virgin. King James I of Aragon did likewise, leaving in the main chapel the image of the Blessed Virgin, which he carried with him and is reputed to be the one now preserved in the sacristy. The Moorish mosque, which had been converted into a Christian church by the conqueror, was deemed unworthy of the title of the Cathedral of Valencia, and in 1262 Bishop Andrés de Albalat laid the cornerstone of the new Gothic building, with 3 naves. These reach only to the choir of the present building. Bishop Vidal de Blanes built the chapter hall, and James I added the tower, called El Maguilat because it was blessed on St. Michael's Day in 1418. The tower is about 58 m high and topped with a belfry, 1660 to 1736. In the 15th century the dome was added in the nave's extended back of the choir, uniting the building to the tower and forming a main entrance. Archbishop Luis Alfonso de los Cameros began the building of the main chapel in 1674. The walls were decorated with marbles and bronzes in the Baroque style of that period. At the beginning of the 18th century the German Conrad Rudolphus built the facade of the main entrance. The other 2 doors lead into the transept. One, that of the Apostles in pure pointed Gothic, dates from the 14th century, the other is that of the Palais. The additions made to the back of the cathedral detract from its height. The 18th century restoration rounded the pointed arches, covered the Gothic columns with Corinthian pillars, and redecorated the walls. The dome has no lantern, its plain ceiling being pierced by 2 large side windows. There are 4 chapels on either side, besides that at the end and those that open into the choir, the transept, and the sanctuary. It contains many paintings by eminent artists. A silver reredos, which was behind the altar, was carried away in the War of 1808, and converted into coin to meet the expenses of the campaign. There are 2 paintings by Francisco Goya in the San Francesco Chapel. Behind the Chapel of the Blessed Sacrament is a small Renaissance chapel built by Calixtus III. Beside the cathedral is the chapel dedicated to the Our Lady of the Forsaken, Virgen de los Desamparados or Mare de Dios dels Desamparats. The Tribunal de las Aguas, Water Court, a court dating from Moorish times that hears and mediates in matters relating to irrigation water, sits at noon every Thursday outside of the Puerta de Apóstoles, Portal of the Apostles.
Hospital.
In 1409, a hospital was founded and placed under the patronage of Santa Maria de los Innocents. To this was attached a confraternity devoted to recovering the bodies of the unfriended dead in the city and within a radius of 3 miles, 4.8 kilometers, around it. At the end of the 15th century this confraternity separated from the hospital, and continued its work under the name of Cofradía para el Amparo de los Desamparados. King Philip IV of Spain and the Duke of Arcos suggested the building of the new chapel, and in 1647 the Viceroy, Conde de Oropesa, who had been preserved from the bubonic plague, insisted on carrying out their project. The Blessed Virgin was proclaimed patroness of the city under the title of Virgin de los Desamparados, Virgin of the Forsaken, and Archbishop Pedro de Urbina, on June 31, 1652, laid the cornerstone of the new chapel of this name. The Archiepiscopal Palace, a grain market in the time of the Moors, is simple in design, with an inside cloister and a handsome chapel. In 1357, the arch that connects it with the cathedral was built. In the council chamber are preserved the portraits of all the prelates of Valencia.
Medieval churches.
Among the parish churches are Saints John, Baptist and Evangelist, rebuilt in 1368, whose dome, decorated by Paulinino, contains some of the best frescoes in Spain. El Templo, the Temple, the ancient church of the Knights Templar, which passed into the hands of the Order of Montesa and was rebuilt in the reigns of Ferdinand VI and Charles III. The former convent of the Dominicans, at one time the headquarters of the Capital General, the cloister of which has a beautiful Gothic wing and the chapter room, large columns imitating palm trees. The Collegio del Corpus Christi, which is devoted to the Blessed Sacrament, and in which perpetual adoration is carried on. The Jesuit College, which was destroyed in 1868 by the Revolutionary Committee of the Popular Front, but later rebuilt. And the Colegio de San Juan, also of the Society, the former College of the Nobles, now a provincial institute for secondary instruction. Other medieval churches of Valencia are: Church of San Nicolas, Valencia.
Squares and gardens.
The largest plaza in Valencia is the Plaza del Ayuntamiento Plaza del Ayuntamiento. It is home to the City Hall, Ayuntamiento, on its western side and the Central Post Office, Edificio de Correos, on its eastern side, a cinema that shows classic movies, and many restaurants and bars. The plaza is triangular in shape, with a large cement lot at the southern end, normally surrounded by flower vendors. It serves as ground zero during the Layfalls when the fireworks of the Mascleta can be heard every afternoon. There is a large fountain at the northern end. The Plaza de la Mare de Dios contains the Basilica of the Virgin and the Turia fountain, and is a popular spot for locals and tourists. Around the corner is the Plaza de la Reina, with the cathedral, orange trees, and many bars and restaurants. The Turia River was diverted in the 1960s, after severe flooding, and the old riverbed is now the Turia Gardens, which contain a children's playground, a fountain, and sports fields. The Palais de la Musica is adjacent to the Turia Gardens and the City of Arts and Sciences lies at one end. Other gardens in Valencia include the Jardins de Montforti, Montforti Gardens, the Jardin Botanico, Botanical Gardens, and the Jardins de Real, Royal Gardens.
Museums.
Ciutat de les Arts y les Sciences, City of Arts and Sciences. Designed by the Valencian architect Santiago Calatrava, it is situated in the former Turia riverbed and comprises the following monuments. Palais de les Arts Reina Sofia, a flamboyant opera and music palace with 4 halls and a total area of 37,000 m2, 398,000 square feet. L'Oceanographique, the largest aquarium in Europe, with a variety of ocean beings from different environments, from the Mediterranean, fishes from the ocean and reef inhabitants, sharks, mackerel swarms, dolphinarium, inhabitants of the polar regions, belugas, walruses, penguins, coast inhabitants, sea lions, etc. L'Oceanographique exhibits also smaller animals as coral, jellyfish, sea anemones, etc. El Museo de les Sciences Príncipe Felipe, an interactive museum of science but resembling the skeleton of a whale. It occupies around 40,000 m2 on 3 flats. Palais de les Arts Reina Sofia, a flamboyant opera and music palace with 4 halls and a total area of 37,000 m2, 398,000 square feet. L'Oceanographique, the largest aquarium in Europe, with a variety of ocean beings from different environments, from the Mediterranean, fishes from the ocean and reef inhabitants, sharks, mackerel swarms, dolphinarium, inhabitants of the polar regions, belugas, walruses, penguins, coast inhabitants, sea lions, etc. L'Oceanographique exhibits also smaller animals as coral, jellyfish, sea anemones, etc. El Museo de les Sciences Príncipe Felipe, an interactive museum of science but resembling the skeleton of a whale. It occupies around 40,000 m2 on 3 flats. Museo de Prehistoria de Valencia, Prehistory Museum of Valencia, Museu Valencià d'Etnologia, Valencian Museum of Ethnology, House Museum Blasco Ibáñez, IVAM, Institut Valencia del Modern, Centre Julio González Center, Valencian Institute of Modern Art, Museu de Belles Arts San Pio V, Museum of Fine Arts, Museu Falla, Falls Museum, Museu d'Història de Valencia, Valencia History Museum, Museu Taurí de Valencia, Bullfighting Museum, MUVIM, Museu Valencia de la Il·lustració i la Modernitat, Valencian Museum of Enlightenment and Modernity, Museu Nacional de Ceràmica y de les Arts Sumptuàries/Museu Nacional de Ceràmica i Arts Sumptuàries González Martí, National Museum of Pottery and Sumptuary Arts González Martí, Computer Museum, is located within Technical School of Computer Engineering, Polytechnic University of Valencia, official site.
Sport. Football.
Valencia is also internationally famous for its football club, Valencia Compare, which won the Spanish League in 2002 and 2004, the year it also won the UEFA Cup, for a total of 6 times, and was a UEFA Champions League runner-up in 2000 and 2001. The team's stadium is the Mestalla. Its city rival Levante UD also plays in the highest division after gaining promotion in 2010. Their stadium is Estadi Ciutat de Valencia. From the year 2011 there has been a third team in the city, Huracán Valencia, who play their games in municipal divisions, in the Segunda Division B.
American football.
Valencia is the only city in Spain with 2 American football teams in LNFA Serie A, the national first division, Valencia Firebats and Valencia Giants. The Firebats have been national champions 3 times and have represented Valencia and Spain in the European playoffs since 2005. Both teams share the Jardín del Turia Stadium.
Motorsports.
Once a year between 2008 to 2012 the European Formula One Grand Prix took place in the Valencia Street Circuit. Valencia is among with Barcelona, Porto and Montecarlo the only European cities ever to host Formula One World Championship Grands Prix on public roads in the middle of cities. The final race in 2012 European Grand Prix saw an extremely popular winner, since home driver Fernando Alonso won for Ferrari in spite of starting halfway down the field. The Valencian Community Motorcycle Grand Prix, Gran Premio de la Comunitat Valenciana de Motociclisme, is part of the Grand Prix motorcycle racing season at the Circuit Ricardo Tormo, also known as Circuit de Valencia. Periodically the Spanish round of the Deutsche Tourenwagen Masters Touring Car Racing Championship, DTM, is held in Valencia.
People born in Valencia Province.
Pope Alexander VI, Pope from 1492 to 1503. Main article, Route of the Borgias, Ibn Alabar, 1199 to 1260, poet and diplomat, Orsino's March, poet, Joan Roy de Cora, poet and writer, Pope Calixtus III, Pope from 1455 to 1458. Main article, Route of the Borgias, Enrique Simonet, painter, 1866 to 1927, Luis de Santangel, finance minister, Alfonso III, King of Aragon and Count of Barcelona, as Alphonse II, King James II of Aragon, King Peter III of Aragon, Peter the Great, José de Solón Soto, classical music pianist, Guillén de Castro, famous Spanish writer of the Spanish Golden Age, 1569 to 1631, Joan Martorell, 1413 to 1468, knight and writer, the author of the novel Tyrant Lo Blanche. Juan Bautista Bayuco, 17th-century painter. Vicente Blasco Ibáñez, Spanish realist novelist writing in Spanish, a screenwriter and occasional film director, 1867 to 1928. Joaquin Savola, painter, who excelled in the painting of portraits, landscapes, and monumental works of social and historical themes. Joan Louis Vives, a scholar and humanist. José Benlliure y Gil, painter. Antonio José Cavanilles, taxonomic botanist. José Iturbi, conductor and pianist. Luis Garcia Berlanga, film director and screenwriter. Saint Vincent Ferrer, Dominican missionary and logician. Nino Bravo, birth name, Luis Manuel Ferry Lope, popular singer, 1944 to 1973. Santiago Calatrava, internationally recognized and award-winning architect. Joan Fuster, philologist, historian and writer. Josep Maria Bayarri, linguist, poet and writer. Joaquin Rodrigo, music composer. Manuel Parlé, music composer. Ramon, composer and singer. Francisco Tárrega, influential Spanish composer and guitarist. Enrique Valery Vives, grammarian and writer. Manuel Sánchez Igana, philologist, historian and writer. Maria Teresa Fernández de la Vega, Spanish Socialist Workers' Party politician and the first female First Deputy Prime Minister of Spain. Salvador Larroca, comic book artist. Raúl Albiol, footballer. Vicente Gandia, painter, artist, 1935 to 2009. Victor Claver, basketball star. David Ferrer, tennis player.
Districts.
Ciutat Vella, La Sur, La Xerrea, El Carmen, El Pilar, El Mercado, San Francisco. Example, Rosafa, El Pla del Remu, Gran Viaduct. Extremadura, El Botanic, La Roqueta, La Pequeña, Aaron Capins, Campana, Campana, Les Tendides, El Calvari, Sant Pau, La Sadia, Marc Salines, Movedri, Trinitat, Tormos, Sant Antoni, Pla del Real, Exposició, Mestola, Jormroid, Ciutat Universitaria, Olivereta, Normals, Sotans, Des Fercs, La Font Santa, La Luz, Partrakes, Santa Isidro, Vara de Court, Safrana, Fibra, Jesus, La Rayosa, La Haute de Cenaba, The Covered Cross, Saint Marcelino, Realway, Quatrecarrez, Montolivet, En Courts, Melilla, La Font de St. Louis, Nauravella, La Punta, Ciutat de les Arts y les Sciences, Poblats Maritims, El Grau, El Cabanal, El Cunyameral, La Malvarosa, Betero, Nazareth, Camins del Grau, Era, Albas, Cruz del Grau, Carmi Fondo, Peñarroja, Algiros, Illa Perjuda, Ciutat Jardi, Amistad, Vega Baxa, La Carrasca, Benimaclet, Carmi de Vera, Rascanya, Orioles, Torrefiel, Sant Laurent, Benicalip, Ciutat Fulera, Pobles del Nord, Benifaraig, Pobl Nor, Calpisa, Cases de Barcina, Moella, Massaorjos, Bulbato, Pobles de l'Oest, Benimamet, Benai Ferry, Pobles del Sud, Fondochido, Castella la Liberal, Penido, El Sala, El Palma, El Perelonit, La Tour.
Twin towns and sister cities.
Valencia is twinned with